everybody. My name is Jenn McCabe, and I'm a partner in Armanino's consulting group. And I work in outsourced finance accounting, and I also help with HR. Lisa Hagen, wave at us, Lisa, is a senior manager in our HR outsourcing team. And Vintage is the head of our AMF team, which is a marketing part of Armanino. And so we stand before you Armaninans, and we're from 3 different parts of the company, but we work together on projects, which is the way that Armanino likes to do things. So Vintage, you have a background in journalism and crisis communications. And so, you know, you're quite a treasure trove for those of us in accounting and HR. And we pride ourselves on being people who are not just HR or finance people, but have an overall mind about the business strategy. And marketing is a huge part of it. And in these times, it's a crisis. And so we've talked a lot recently to you. And I want to break this down into 2 things and ask you for your advice to people who are listening. And I want to talk about pre-crisis communication, which is, for me, best. Let's not wait and react. So if we're going to be proactive, there are a couple things to think about. So Lisa,
Right.
what do you want to tell you?
Well, for our piece of that, it's all about communicating to everyone to instill confidence that you have a plan in place, number 1. And also we really focus on, you know, looking at the handbook and the offer letters, and are we furloughing people? Are we laying them off? We need to communicate that well to, like I said, have people have confidence in the company and that they're prepared and doing right by their people.
And Vintage, I'm thinking about, holy cow, everybody might get sick. So what would you say to that? How do you prevent?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about this is, and I've been talking a lot about this lately, as you might imagine. So you have to think of your business as a group of stakeholders. And so you have your employees, you have your customers, you have vendor partners or channel partners. And then you have to kind of walk through your relationship with each of them. So for employees, I mean, the big thing right now is that you have to understand that they're coming back, okay, into a work environment that is not the same work environment that they left. Some of their fellow employees are gone. The trust they may have in that company is not the same. The value proposition for which you offered them, that they said, yes, I buy into that, that could have changed, been altered, could have blown up. So the first thing you want to do is start to reestablish trust. I believe that the order is, let me tell you what all the things we've done to ensure your safety in this work environment. And by the way, this communication has to be a 2-way street. You have to be prepared to say, what do you think about that? How did we do? And you have to have thick skin and say, okay, we may have missed something, and be prepared to make that change. I think the next question you'll ask yourself as employers is the job that they're coming back to do, how different is that? And I was on a webinar the other day, and I used the example of, you know, we made square widgets, now we make triangular widgets. Well, you've got to understand, I'm coming back to a job and I just know square widgets. So how am I going to make these triangle widgets in an environment where I'm already wondering, is it safe? So you really want to think through, from the employee's perspective, how do I feel? What am I concerned about? What are my fears? And an executive team should map that out and understand all the places it can go awry, and do your best to prepare for it, and have a plan around each of those places it can go awry. But I will give you one thing, and it's this: forgive yourself. You will not hit every one of those. Something's going to come up you don't know about. And forgive yourself for that, and be transparent in your communications with your employees. Hey, we're going to not get all of this right, but let me show you, let me demonstrate my commitment to you. This is all the planning that went into it.
Okay, so that's preventative, because you're saying, I'm not going to get it right. So later, when things don't happen the way that you were hoping they were going to happen. So say your folks come back to work and they're having to learn how to make a triangle or I like burger joint examples. They're learning to make chicken sandwiches because the burgers are gone or something like that. And they're stressed out. They're behind the grill, but they're worried about getting sick. They're having to learn a new job. But you've submitted this nice communication to them. Lisa Hagen has told you that the burger guy only has, you know, time between 10 and 12 to make burgers, and we've trained him and you've helped with that. Meantime, you're communicating to the consumer as well, right? Preventatively, this is what we're doing to keep you safe if you come here, right? Same kind of mirrored communication. What happens now when we pivot and we have an infection? Then what does your team do? I'm an accountant, and all of a sudden my receipts go south. Lisa's the HR person.
Yep.
People are sick. She's blood testing them. I'm counting no money, and we call you.
Okay, so I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to show you one place where already something's come up in your example that we didn't anticipate. It takes longer to cook chicken than it does beef. So the throughput.
I don't cook. I don't know that.
Well, I do. The throughput is now slower. And if I'm the manager, I'm wondering, does the company think I lost a step because I can't run out or produce as many units? This is where the company has to say, and we understand if you could kick out this many burgers in an hour, it's a lower amount for chicken sandwiches. But now, so we have an infection, or we have a number of infections. Well, I will say to you that, and this is something people always struggle with in crisis communications, and that is transparency is king. Now, there are times, let's be honest, there are times when you're managing a crisis and your attorneys will tell you there are certain things you cannot share, and I would say you always want to
follow that advice.
On my screen. You want to say, hey, immediately to your marketplace, listen, we've had a number of infections. Here's what we're doing. We're shutting down for 2 weeks. We're in communication with whatever jurisdiction, city, county, state, jurisdiction that manages the policies of retail units who have infections. And then you're going to say, here's what we've done with our employees. Preferably, here's how we're taking care of them, because it's, you know, the 12 that didn't test positive, it's not their fault. Here's when we anticipate reopening, and here is the company or the process we're using for cleaning our entire environment so that you run no risk. And the same thing with the employee. Forgive yourself if a consumer says, hey, have you considered X? If it's a good idea, praise the consumer, show that transparency. Here's why this kind of advice makes executives nervous. And quite frankly, sometimes it makes me nervous. In the world that we live in social media, oh my goodness, so many screwball comments and suggestions are going to come in. That's just par for the course. Be not afraid to sort through the screwballs and look for the relevant information and the fair criticism. Your employees, your customers, your community will give you credit for that. It's a pandemic. Nobody gets it perfect.
Right. Okay. So, Lisa, you often say to people that they need to use technology to support a lot of what he's talking about, this get back to work, use an app. You also say, I hear you over and over say, do not let someone go or tell me you're having a furlough and give me no notice. Yeah. So Vintage was talking preventative. Having a plan is really important, and then addressing the crisis. And now I want to throw you a little bit of a loop, Vintage. I know you don't love this question, but so I handle a lot of the PPP while Lisa's handling furloughs and layoffs and bringing people back. On the PPP, we have people who get a ginormous sum of money. And again, I want to ask the question, preventative communication, because we know there's going to be a public relations blowback for some people who borrowed $10 million. Say it's a franchise. And so it's a brand name that people in this community know because they have a bunch of locations. There's preventative, and then there's your name's on the list, and the community's mad. what would you recommend if someone's listening to us who has a PPP loan and is nervous?
So the first thing I would say is if you took a PPP loan under dubious circumstances or anything other than the authentic nature of what that loan is to be, give the money back. I think if you give the money back and then someone sees your name on the list, it's again the transparency. We believed initially when we applied for this was the right thing to do. Upon further assessment, we realized it wasn't, so we gave the money back. Again, it's a pandemic. No one's going to say, "Oh, you should have given the money back a week earlier." No, you're gonna get dinged if you give the money back because someone spotted it. So the first and foremost, if you shouldn't have that money, give it back. And I think if you do so before you're spotted, or before some consumer group or some city, county, or state, feds, whomever, watchdog organization is paying attention to these things, I think you're going to be fine. But you should also have a holding statement and a plan ready that if you're criticized for that and it starts to hurt your business, we have a response plan. So that's what I would do. I would tell you
for the response, but would you ever, because I know you were a journalist, would you ever actually solicit a report in the paper or an interview that says, hey, we got the money and here's what we did, we saved 100 jobs? Would you ever recommend that, or would you recommend waiting?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, if I got the money and I saved 100 jobs, then I used the money for what it was used, what it was designed to do. Would I go out and seek a reporter and say, hey, pat me on the back because I saved jobs? No. I think a lot of people are trying to save jobs. You're no more noble than the next CEO, him or her, that made that decision. So no, I would not solicit praise for that. But I would, if you got the money for legitimate reasons and you used it appropriately, I probably would do a little bit of work saying, if I get the call, because some reporter is going to look at all the businesses in their jurisdiction or their region, or if it's their viewership or their readership, and they will call. So you should have a plan ready to say, yep, right thing to do. Here's how the funds were used. Here's what it's meant to our company. Thank God for the feds.
Yeah, because somebody's going to fine-tooth that list for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And if I was still a reporter and I ran business desk, I ran city desk, I'd be working on that right about now.
You know it. So you'd have a statement ready, just like what Lisa's trying to do with a plan to be ready for that first infection or that third infection. You have to be ready with your communication. I'm a little worried, and the reason we're doing this whole discussion is that we have these HR people, HR responsibilities for hundreds of companies, where we don't want them to call us and go, what do I do? We want them to call us now and say, what will I do when the time comes? All right, so my last question, and Lisa, I know you're into social media, so you may have to help me, because I still call a hashtag a pound sign. But,
we'll get you there.
Yeah, thanks. So Vintage, we're talking about communication to support HR and accounting, and we use it all the time here at Armanino. We use technology. We're doing all of this. But my question for you is, how do you choose the channel? How do you reach people? And I'm specifically asking you about employees. Let's stop with, we're protecting brands. I'm asking you to protect my brand when I talk about my restaurant, my burger joint, my people. How do I know that I'm reaching them? How do you do that in these times, now that no one leaves their house and drives by a billboard?
It's a great question, and I wish I had a universal answer. I would say to you, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I'll give you a couple of examples. It's actually, one is not related to COVID. One is related to social unrest. We have a client, very strong client, very strong white male CEO who wanted to really engage with employees around social justice issues and the civil unrest, I should have said. I think I said so. Yeah, civil unrest and social justice issues. Worst thing in the world is just to send out an email. It leaves so much interpretation around tone, commitment. We said to him, we're going to do an on-screen interview. I want people to see his commitment. I want them to see his body language, his facial expressions. I want them to hear his voice. I want them to see that this is not lip service, but this is commitment. Now, if I did not believe that that was all true, the last thing I would do is put him on video. But
on video on Zoom? Like, is this, so what if I'm a food manufacturer and I need to have that conversation? How do I reach them if they don't have computers? What, you know?
They have phones and they can get on, they can, one, it could be a Zoom call via the phone and they can get video. But, you know, there are other ways, and that is, it could be, you know, a former journalist interviewing that CEO in a video that is then pushed out with a follow-up, by the way. Hey, send in your questions and we're going to do another one. I've had executives who are horrible on camera. In that case, it would definitely be a Q&A because I can control the give and the take and make sure I set them up to win. In some cases, let's go back to the widgets, okay? Or your burgers and your chicken, right? That one I might say, depending on who the employee is, I might have more of a written communication where they can go back to it over and over, so because they're learning a new process. I might have an FAQs page along with a how-to instructional video, because some people learn visually, some people in a different manner. And so again, what you're saying is, what is the task at hand? What are the obstacles? Then what is the channel? In my business, especially on the advertising side, one of the most frustrating things we get is when a client says, you know, my 17-year-old is all over that social media. This needs to be social media. Well, is your 17-year-old the primary target? Because your wife is actually the primary target and she streams on her computer. So we're going a different direction. So don't let the channel drive the idea. Let the objective, what's the objective? What's success look like? What are the obstacles? Figure that out and then find your way to what the best channel is.
I agree with you. Actually, I think you have to, I've heard both of you say this word a lot, but pivot and be prepared, because we have some clients or customers who have very vastly different types of employees just within one company. And so we have to think about that. Do we use our HRIS to send out the message, like you said, Vintage, whether it's video or a Q&A or whatever? But I feel like over communicating during this time is really appreciated and really necessary, and maybe you do it in several different ways so you make sure you cover everybody.
Absolutely.
Lisa, how do you think employees prefer? So if you were working with Vintage and you had to get out a safety message, how do you think people want to be communicated with?
I feel like most of what we're being asked is what he said, you know, app, everybody has one. So that seems to be what I am asked for the most is, is there an app? Can we get it on our phones? Can we get it out to people who are in the fields, like you said too, aren't sitting at a computer? And I think that's the way it's moving. And that's just what we're asked for the most. But then we do have some who are more like, our people aren't going to do that. So we have to be ready to go either way.
Yeah, it's funny that, so we're kind of weird in that we're an advertising agency, PR firm that does internal communications. And we didn't set out to do that. What happened was we had a very large international client that came to us, and they had a fantastic advertising campaign and market that featured one of the most prominent musicians in the world. And they said, hey, the reason why we're coming to you is because when we speak to our employees, we have to have the kind of sophistication that we have in our external market. And so we treat the employees or the tasks like we treat external communications. Every consumer, every employee is not the same. There's segments of them. There's those who are 50 plus. There are those who are 22. And so each of them has a preference. So when we build an internal communications campaign, we're looking at the ecosystem. What's the nature of your employee base? What portions represent, 25 to 35? It's the same thing. And which tools, video,
Right.
written communication. So that's why I say you want to avoid the catch-all. Now, a company will have established platforms. So an intranet is an established platform. An app is some of our clients have actual TV. They have a TV channel or a video channel, whether it's YouTube or it's internal. So
I like that. And Lisa, I'm going to make sure I note that you said HRIS, which is a really cool tool for communicating with the whole entire group of employees at once if you need to.
Yes.
And I'm going to bring us to a close by saying, all right, so I've got Lisa and I've got Vintage, and when I have an HR thing going on, I need to get you guys both involved. When I have a client or customer, I need to get Vintage involved. And I am relieved to sign off by saying, yay, no one told me that I need to communicate using the gram or Twitter to my staff. I know that we do that to our consumers sometimes, but I'm so relieved that neither one of you told me that that was a strategy that I needed to learn. So with that,
Hashtag, nope, you don't have to.
I'll go back to looking stamps right now. Okay. All right. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate the time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.